System Shock to Fiction by Ken Levine. Copyright 1999. Irrational Games. Read to you by ShephardReborn. Part 1. Marie Sainte Anne de la Croix stood at the end of a promontory and stared off into the blackness. She had taken the spinwag from her seals only an hour before, and in her stomach she still felt that vague queasiness that particular form of transport always left her with. "It's not right," she thought on a thread of her taxed multitasking mind, "to go from one continent to New England in 10 minutes. It makes them the same. It destroys them both by bringing them together." This line of thinking annoyed her, and she grimaced at her own hypocrisy. She could have any form of transport to Massachusetts. It was she who chose the spinwag, like it was she who chose to build Sarah. "You are part of a problem, Mary. Let's not forget that for a minute, no?" Two mechanical seagulls quacked and swooped above her, pretending to scan the ocean for fish that had been extinct for 60 years. What was real about this scene, she thought? The birds, the dog by her side ordered at 10% below cost from Triops Simple Division, even the gyroscopically enhanced waves, crashing magnificently against the stout Yankee rocks. "Will you do it, Mary?" Polito had asked her. "Will you do this thing for them? Do you have a choice in the matter?" She had completed the bulk of her theoretical work nearly 2 years earlier. She had spent the last 2 years building simulation models on her hand-modified Electra D3 system. The Electra was one of the first of the current generation of personality boxes. For over 35 years, following Shodan and Citadel, computing power had retreated to its original binary, characterless form, neutral, logical, and rigid, entirely unable to make any cognitive leaps. The UNN had made sure of that. The Processing Rationalization Act of 2074 had made sure of that. The argument before the High Court made by Jared Lukash railed against the very notion of digital personality. We can give them personality. We can give them creativity. We can give them feelings. But can we give them accountability? Can we give them a soul? If Dante's pilgrim had made his journey today, would he meet Shodan in his travels? But Electra was new, created after the reforms of 2107, when the unified national nominate, the government du jour, came to the realization that what they were not developing legitimately, others were developing in secret, others who might have a more than a passing interest in things like politics, technology and control, and slowly barriers began to evaporate. Without Electra, the work might have taken 8 years. With Electra, it should have taken 5. Delacroix had completed 2 years of work, and now they were already after her, determined to call her results conclusive. "Evening, Mary." Delacroix turned around, not all that startled. She was a famous person, frequently interrupted by strangers. She turned around to see the tall, starched figure standing before her. She had never met him, but she recognized him instantly. Funny how two famous people who've never once seen each other can act with confidence upon meeting as if they had already been introduced. "Captain Diego, people might say this is a coincidence. Who would expect you to turn up on the same deserted promontory on the Massachusetts coast as I? Almost miraculous." "I was at your office in Paris, but they said you had left." "Who told you I was here? I would have thought diverting through Côte d'Azur would have—" She trailed off when she heard the imperious tone in her own voice. She didn't like that side of herself much. "Dr. Delacroix, if you know who I am, then you should also know that none of your staff needed to betray you." "Oh, so you tracked me down through your elaborate UNN spy network. I don't know whether to be flattered or disturbed by that, Captain." "I don't think that's a good idea. Why don't you contact one of the Triops lawyers? If you throw a stick at New Atlanta, you're likely to hit one. I'm not here to give you any trouble. In fact, let's call this an unofficial visit." "If you wish," said Delacroix wearily. "We know about Sarah. We know a lot about Sarah." "Then why do you need to talk to me?" "I don't need to talk to you, Doctor. From what I understand, you don't exactly have a lot of friends over at Triop." Delacroix said nothing. "No offense, Doctor, but I don't like Sarah. Sarah makes people like me very nervous." "The people like you?" said Delacroix. "What exactly do people like you like and dislike?" "We like order. We like method, and precision, and procedure. We've got a lot in common, I would think, Dr. Delacroix. I'm aware of your concerns about Sarah. I've not been particularly private about them. We know there have been issues, unanswered questions. We know that the development schedule is extremely aggressive." Delacroix seemed annoyed. "Theoretically, Sarah should work. What are you trying to accomplish here, Captain? I'm not some hacker. I'm a scientist. I don't believe in shortcuts or luck. I believe in research, statistics, and scientific method. And time. I believe in lots and lots of time. My work has nothing to do with recognition or avarice. I'm already more wealthy and famous than I ever contemplated." Diego knew this was true. Any accomplishments Delacroix could achieve now would yield her relatively little. In fact, her efforts only exposed her to the risk of failure, something her stellar career never really known. Her work, published in '97, had opened up the door to the first wave of serious post-relativity thinkers. She had pushed past Einstein in theory, and now seemed poised to do the same in practice. He also knew the doctor was prodding him with her response. After all, it was his father, Edward Diego, who in 2072 had contracted the hacker to infiltrate Shodan for him. When his father had the hacker disable ethical constraints, not a particularly difficult feat on a personality box of that generation, they ushered into existence the hobgoblin of the 21st century. Shodan became the proper noun that replaced Hitler as archetypical reference to evil. After all, while Shodan in the end was only the murderer of hundreds, it was the first singular threat ever faced by a man as a species. In her artificial megalomania, Shodan had nearly brought an end to it all. But the hacker killed Shodan, and his father. Captain Diego was never exactly sure how to feel about this. His father murdered by the most famous man on earth. He knew how he felt about Edward Diego, however. He despised the very thought of him, his unfathomable greed, his irresponsibility. His father had rent his family apart, left them penniless. The press had always been there, tormenting him at school, on street, in his home. Why did your father do it? What was he after? And always, what did you know about it? But it was William's Diego mother who bore the brunt of the family's agony. Or perhaps she was less equipped to live with it than her son. She killed herself less than a year after Citadel, deftly slicing open her veins. He found her leaning over the bathroom skin, her face submerged in a scarlet water, bloated and puffy. As he pulled her out, her skin didn't feel like a person at all. Instead, it held the cool, even consistency of vinyl. Manhandling his mother out of the sink, he thought of his life then, of his ability to survive the Diego brand. And he knew the only successful vector he could assume was that of the opposite. He would become the anti-Diego, the un-Edward. And now he was no longer the son of his father, infamous executive of the Trioptimum Corporation and progenitor of Shodan. He was Rear Admiral William Bedford Diego, the hero of the Boston Harbor, the safe, confident face of the UNN. The shoe-in for bureaucratic candidates party nomination for Interior Minister in 2116. Captain Diego. No one ever referred to him as Admiral, but instead under the rank he came to fame under the Boston Harbor, was more than a brightest star in the Navy and a political hopeful. He had come to represent the culture of the UNN, the government that had risen out of the rebellion of 2075 that toppled the corporate oligarchy. Citadel Station was the final, revolting chapter in the history of government by industrial mandate, a 25-year period where the industries of the world reigned, and Trioptimum Corporation reigned over industry. The time of the corporations began with the passage of High's Bishop Bill of 2031 that legitimized corporate entities to form governments if their employee population represented more than 66% of designated region. The strength of the lobbyists to then increase the size of these regions led to entire states being subsumed under Hayes Bishop. Eventually, only token traditional governments remained in the West, and the last of vestige of the United States slipped quietly into the Triumph fold in 2059. But now that was all over. Diego believed that people craved government, real government. The Shodan incident was only an excuse to go back to the former state of things, and now there was an order. The corporations were once again under control, severely regulated. Diego was surprised that Sarah wasn't derailed at the moment her existence was discovered. They could argue that Delacroix was working independently, but that wouldn't matter even if it were true. The Commission had ultimate arbitration over these matters and demonstrated a ferocious desire to use it. "Are you here to shut me down, Captain? I wouldn't think so. There are legions of bureaucrats who could have been assigned that task." "Is Sarah feasible?" he said, interrupting her. "Oh, yes. If you believe the current generation of simulation protocols, Sarah is entirely feasible." "You sound skeptical." "Somebody has to. Why do you think I'll be willing to talk to you about this, Captain? Did you think your celebrity will impress me so that I would be craving to unburden my soul to you?" She produced a slight mocking coo. "I can help you, Doctor. I'm in no need of funding. I'm sure you're aware of that. I don't need you to finish Sarah." "No, but you might need me to stop her." Delacroix turned to face him, understanding all at once. Sarah, everything Sarah meant for Triop, for technology, for everything. It terrified Diego. She smiled at him. She wanted to pat his shoulder, something to show her appreciation for his kind of people. She didn't know there were any left. "Do you know, Captain, when Oppenheimer was preparing the first atomic device for Trinity, he didn't know if the chain reaction started with its detonation would ever end. There was a distinct possibility that the fission process, once initiated, would just continue and continue and continue, and there Colonel Groves stood, representing the United States Army, the greatest cause for good, the savior of the world. And Groves said, 'Do it.' It was worth the risk for him. The dice will always be thrown, Captain, no matter what the stakes. Do you think you can't change that?" Captain William Bedford Diego considered this for a moment. He summoned a SimSig from his wrist replicator, already lit. He drew deeply on it and exhaled, releasing smoke that only held odor and opacity for him. He better quit these things, he thought, knowing that the SimSigs held no psychological side effects. But somehow Diego still relied on them, on this safe, so clever technology. "Maybe we can't put the genie back in a bottle, Doctor, but we can try to put a leash on the son of a bitch." With this, Diego popped out another SimSig, lit it, and handed it to Delacroix. Not looking at him, she snatched it and took a deep, satisfying drag. "Did your Secret Service tell you
about my weakness for this.
He shrugged. One junkie can always spot another. She laughed at this, and then dispatched the cig with a slight snap of her fingers.
You know, Anatoly Korenchkin will find about this.
You let me worry about him, he countered, somewhat heroically. She frowned at this.
Oh, Captain, the more people worrying about Anatoly Korenchkin, the better.
This is the end of part 1. Thank you for listening. Shepherd Reborn out.